My name is Daniel Welch. I am an artist manager with New Classical Artist Management, and I'm here today to talk to you about singing, auditions, photo shoots, and just a little wisdom from along the way. So here we go. Number one, what is the first thing that catches my attention when I hear a singer? So, the baseline for everything is that we want beautiful singing. That's a given. So I'm just going to skip that and go right to the next thing. Art is about reaction, reflexive, instinctual, unconscious, visceral reaction. It makes us feel, it forces us to think, it creates an experience. What catches my attention is having a true reaction to a singer that I can't control. The most impactful performances I've seen were the ones where I had a visceral reaction that was reflexive. These are performances that pushed the rest of the world aside and really dropped me into their experience. I could feel their pain, their sorrow, their adoration, their ecstasy, their jealousy. Those are the performances that stand out to me. And they can be done on a stage with an orchestra, or they can be done in an audition room with just a piano, or literally just a voice. There is no template for creating these moments. In 2002, the Canadian Opera Company in Toronto did a production of Giulio Cesare. It had several of these memorable, just wild performances in it. And the first impression that hit me was Daniel Taylor. It was the first time I had ever experienced a real countertenor, and I don't know if subconsciously as I was expecting something that was feminine or frail or what, but what came out was this dynamic, bombastic sound with a massive stage presence that took complete and total control. And I was blown away. It was not what I was expecting. It was, I don't know what it was, but it got my attention. That's for damn sure. Number two of the evening definitely was Eva Podlish. Her storytelling, her embodiment of Cesare was so comprehensive that 19 years later, I still remember her in that role. But the one performance that took the cake that night by far was, and I apologize for butchering her name, Isabel Barakterian. She sang Cleopatra, and most explicitly what floored me was her piangero. So the direction was weird. It actually had her prostrate on stage. It had her lay on her back with her head almost hanging off the front of the stage. She crawled to the furniture and pulled herself up, all while singing this gut-wrenching lament. And I remember thinking that the direction should have actually taken away from the performance, but in reality there was a purity to just how low she had felt, how she hit rock bottom, and the rest of this mass. I was in the Hummingbird Performing Arts Center, and the whole house just went out of focus and just disappeared, and it was just her in this gut-wrenching moment. And it wasn't like I was watching this performance, it was like she was in my head. And if you've ever had one of those experiences, you know exactly what I'm talking about. For the entire drive home, which was 3 hours because I lived in Rochester at the time, I didn't turn on music in the car at all. I listened to that piangero in my head over and over and over for 3 hours. It was that gripping. And I remember the first time I really heard one of the sopranos that's on our roster, Jessica Sandage, sing. And this was at a salon setting, Upper East Side penthouse salon setting, that was the home of an opera fan / patron. And she pulled out of her pocket, "Ain't It a Pretty Night?" And, that's a lot of people sing that song. But that was the first time I had ever heard that song for what it really is. And the same thing that happened with the piangero happened in the salon. Everybody else, I had people literally 3 feet on either side of me, and they just vanished out of the way, and it was just her in my head. And it was just so completely compelling. There was nothing else that mattered at the time. I think of other people that are like that. It's Quinn Kelsey as Germont, Isabel Leonard as Marnie, Leontine Price as Norma. Her Costa Diva floors me every time. Singers tell stories through colors, tone, lyricism, dynamics, acting. When all of those things all line up for the sake of the story, that's when the magic happens. I don't want a performance to be perfect. That doesn't exist. Something that is aiming for a perfect performance is cold. It doesn't have life in it. I want story. I want vulnerability. I want to be dragged into the world of a performance that's really what stands out to me. And if you can develop that, you'll be very, very hard to say no to. So, second question. When you're auditioning somebody new for your roster, would you prefer to hear canon first or something new and contemporary, and why? I am completely and totally torn on this subject. I sit on audition panels all the time for companies, and I hear several hundred singers each season. And this question is always constantly up for debate. In fact, I asked the same question of Leanne Misleski on my last podcast episode. So to answer that question, half of me says, yes, I want standard canon because I know what to expect. I know what I'm listening for. I know what the challenges are. I know what the hard parts are. I know what it's going to show me of the voice. I know exactly what makes a fantastic performance in the piece and what can screw it up. So if you walk in with, say, Dalla sua pace, I know I'm either going to be wowed or I know that I'm up for some really cringe-worthy moments because I know how Mozart wrote for tenors. And I've sung the piece and I know what it takes to go into that. It's going to tell me more than anything else in the audition packet. There is a reason that a lot of people will be like, can we just hear the Mozart? That said, I love hearing new music that's truly special. In fact, I think that we need to normalize the expansion beyond standard canon in the audition room. I think that we need to amend the canon. We need to add to it. I remember sitting in an audition and a mezzo that I knew opened with something. And I honestly don't even recall what it was because it was so cataclysmically fine. It was above average. There was nothing wrong with it, but there was nothing in it that just went pow. And so because it wasn't bad, they wanted to hear a second piece. And so the panel looked at me and they're like, what do you want to hear? And I skimmed over her rep list and Dr. Atomic jumped out at me. And the moment that happened, I practically yelled, "Am I in your light? That's what I want to hear. I would love to hear the Dr. Atomic, please." And big smile on her face. She took a second, reset her head, breathed in her own time. She didn't bring the piece to us. She brought us into the piece. And it truly wowed everybody on the panel. Bring to the table what you do well, what's captivating. If you do that, and it's not standard rep, then we're probably going to ask for the Mozart or the Puccini. Okay, so third question. What are one or two things that singers can do to stand out in an audition? These ones are easy. Number one, choose the right repertoire. It's more revealing than you think what you choose for your list. It tells us who you think you are, where you think you're going, what kind of character you relate to. It tells us what you're capable of. And if all those things don't line up in the audition, then you've lost your proof of concept. In fact, you've proven that maybe you still have some pathfinding to explore and some discoveries about your voice still. Stand out by bringing rep in that truly, really suits you. Not every mezzo is going to be a Carmen or a Dalila. Not every bass is going to be a Mephistopheles. Bring what suits your voice and makes you shine. Truly, completely shine. I should note, this has literally nothing to do with body type. Not at all. I've been rocked by singers of every human template you can imagine. You do not have to be a size 2 to sing Carmen or Musetta, but you do need to bring that character to life convincingly. And if it's not in your voice, find characters that are in your voice. Bring the right rep. Number 2, work the room. This is not about hubris. Please don't bring hubris to the room. This is about being confident in who you are mixed with your ability to dialogue and have a real adult conversation. That's working the room. We want to contract people that we know we're going to click with, people that we enjoy being around, or at least can stand being around, and when the rapport feels natural. So maybe a little banter, but not too much. Be yourself, be real, don't be forced, and know when it's time to sing. The art of working the room also means knowing when it's time to speak through your music. Okay, next question. On top of founding a management company, you're also a photographer. What's the biggest piece of advice you can give to singers when they're going to get new headshots or press shots? This one is actually really, really easy and should stick with you. No problem. Practice. Just practice. So every model that I've worked with, and I've been a commercial photographer for over a dozen years, every model that I work with or know personally practice posing, every single one. And not tons of time, but enough to know what their facial expressions look like, what their angles are like, how it's going to feel in front of the camera when they do certain poses or shape certain ways. Those are important things to know. If you aren't totally happy with what you practice in the mirror, then how are you going to be happy with what comes out of the camera? Be prepared. I always tell clients right off the bat, first thing, have just three poses ready to rock and roll. And I'll take care of the rest. It only takes three poses, and we can shift and change and make everything else work if you can nail those three poses. So if you need inspiration, reach out to your photographer or myself, shoot me an email and be like, hey, I would love pose ideas. And I say, not a problem. I have a couple of pages that I always link on Pinterest that are great poses for people across the board. Some are commercial, some are a little more lifestyle, headshot poses, variations across the board. But absolutely do some research, find some inspiration, and prep your poses. Just three, that's all we need. And remember that it's going to be work. It's absolutely going to be work. You should get to the end of your shoot and be like, man, why am I tired? And I'm going to say, because you put the work in and you nailed it and the images show it. Put the work in, do some practice. That is the best preparation advice I've ever seen work in reality. So the last question is an interesting one. If you could give your college self one piece of advice to better prepare for where you are now, what would it be? And this is interesting because here's where I tend to shock a lot of people when I get this question. The answer is nothing. I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't tell myself anything. Where I am now is 100% the result of me being a session musician, an actor, an opera singer, a producer, a writer, a director, a photographer, a marketing specialist, an artistic director, all of the above. I've held every single one of those roles, and every single one taught me something. Where I am is the result of me chasing things repeatedly that made me happy. The what ifs don't get you anywhere, but applying all the bits of wisdom from across the decades, those will open far more doors than you will ever realize. Thanks so much for hanging out for my interview today. If you're interested in finding a little bit more about me or my companies, you can check out New Classical Artist Management at newclassicalartists.com. If you're interested in turning a side hustle into a real business, or if you need brand strategy consulting, visit me at ideodyssey.com. That's my marketing company. My photography work can be seen at danielwelchmedia.com. And I host This Artistic Life, a podcast for emerging artists by professional artists who share the wisdom that they've gathered along the way. This used to be the Opera Biz podcast, but during the pandemic, I strongly felt that it's time for the arts collectively to have a voice and stand up together. So check out This Artistic Life anywhere you listen to podcasts, or visit the website at thisartisticpodcast.com.